Welcome to the deep dive. So today we're asking this pretty wild question. What if a nation isn't defined by, lines on a map, by borders,
Right.
but by fundamental physics? We're diving into this idea called the Relativity Republic. Basically a whole society that's always on the move, constantly in motion. And because of that motion, time itself flows differently for them.
Yeah, it's quite a concept.
Imagine that motion, creating sovereignty, creating culture, even shaping their laws. Okay, let's unpack this. We've got some amazing sources, articles, research, really looking at how Einstein's relativity could, quite literally, define political identity. How velocity changes time, changes how people perceive things, and, what it would actually mean to build a whole civilization that just never stops moving.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? How physics, something we usually see as just governing stars and planets, could potentially reshape, everything about human experience, society, identity, what it means to belong. It definitely sets a compelling stage for how we might imagine future civilizations.
Yeah.
Especially, as we start looking out toward space more seriously.
Absolutely. So to really get our heads around this republic idea, maybe we should quickly touch on relativity itself, just, how it works. Because it's not just theory, is it?
No, not at all. It's very real.
So back in 1905, Einstein drops his special theory of relativity. And the core ideas are still pretty mind-bending, like time actually slows down for things when they're moving fast.
Dilation.
That's the one. And objects get heavier, sort of, gain mass with speed, and nothing with mass can hit the speed of light.
Right, the ultimate speed limit.
And then later, he expanded it with general relativity, showing how gravity itself actually warps space and time.
And these aren't just abstract ideas.
Yeah.
We see them. They're observable, confirmed phenomena. You mentioned GPS satellites earlier.
Yeah.
They literally need relativistic corrections built in. Without them, they'd be off by, miles every single day. It's significant. Oh, yeah. And think about particle accelerators. You get these tiny particles, muons, right? They usually decay really, really fast. But when you speed them up near the speed of light, they appear to live much longer from our perspective. Their internal clocks have slowed down. That's time dilation right there in the lab.
So we see it happen.
We do. Even just flying clocks on really fast airplanes, they measurably tip just a tiny bit slower than identical clocks left on the ground. So it raises this really interesting question. What if we didn't just correct for these effects?
What if we, leaned into them?
Exactly. What if we actually built an entire society around them?
And that's the jump, right? From physics theory to actual human society. So let's picture this family, say, the Changs. They live on one of these huge relativistic ships, traveling super fast, maybe close to light speed.
Yep.
Because they're moving that fast, they literally experience time more slowly than, say, us back here on a planet.
Right, relative to the stationary observer.
So from Earth's viewpoint, maybe centuries go by while the Changs are out there traveling. But for them, only a few decades might have passed on the ship.
That's the core of it. And that creates this incredible dichotomy, doesn't it? They could be centuries ahead in terms of where they are in the timeline from Earth's perspective.
But maybe only decades ahead technologically within their own frame. Or maybe even behind culturally if they've been isolated.
Precisely. Isolated by time itself, yet maybe still trying to communicate across that gap.
And what's really striking is that this kind of mobile civilization, it wouldn't be tied to any one place, right? No planet, no star system is home in the traditional sense.
Exactly. Its identity, its very essence, will be defined purely by its motion, its velocity, not by geography.
That's the heart of the Relativity Republic idea.
Yes. A civilization where citizenship is fluid. You join by getting on the ship, essentially. Your nationality becomes your speed relative to others.
How would that even work, practically?
Well, the sources we looked at suggest governance would need incredibly precise timekeeping. Like synchronization using quantum clocks.
Okay, quantum clocks, those are based on atomic vibrations, right? Super accurate.
Extremely accurate. And they'd be absolutely essential for keeping track of time across all these different relativistic frames of reference. Because even tiny little discrepancies in timekeeping could cause massive chaos in a society built on velocity differences.
Right. Imagine legal systems trying to cope with that. Contracts signed, ages calculated.
You'd need legal frameworks that explicitly account for time disparity, maybe even cultural rituals based on reaching certain velocity thresholds or synchronizing moments. The sources suggest that basic concepts we take for granted, like age, memory, even idea of progress, would mean something completely different for them.
Okay, but let's think about the ripple effects. For us, back home on a planet, or for other stationary societies, how does this fundamentally change things?
It changes everything.
We talked about time dilation. If the Chang's ship is near light speed, they experience maybe 1 year, while 10 years pass back on Earth or wherever.
Yeah.
Diplomacy becomes, well, incredibly difficult, right? Communications would be delayed, always arriving out of sync with the present moment of the receiver.
Absolutely. And think about immigration. Imagine someone who's, say, 25 years old on board the ship. They arrive at a new planetary system, but from the perspective of that system, 200 years might have passed since the ship left its last point of contact.
That's mind-boggling. How do you enforce treaties or laws across those kinds of time gaps?
You probably can't use existing frameworks. The research really points towards needing entirely new systems, new ways of thinking about agreements and interactions across time.
It sounds like this society would just be fundamentally out of sync with everyone else.
Indeed. The sources use this term, a chronological diaspora, a scattering of people not just across space, but across different timelines.
Wow, chronological diaspora.
But, this disconnection could also offer some pretty amazing strategic advantages.
Like what?
Well, they could observe long-term processes like planetary evolution or the rise and fall of other civilizations at a much faster subjective pace for them.
Ah, because more time is passing outside their ship.
Exactly. Their own internal technology could potentially advance at an accelerated subjective rate, too. Fewer perceived years passing between major breakthroughs from their point of view.
Okay, that makes sense.
They could even theoretically avoid external conflicts or galactic crises by literally skipping over them in time, emerging centuries later when things have settled down.
So they need some serious planning tools for that.
Definitely. The governance would probably rely heavily on something like AI-aided time compression models, complex algorithms constantly calculating and predicting the time differences between various ships, between the Republic and external observers.
To make sure decisions are based on the most accurate picture of everyone's relative time frame.
Right. It's essential for coordination.
You mentioned advantages, but I keep coming back to the isolation, that constant, unavoidable chronological disconnect. Wouldn't that have huge psychological costs for the citizens? What does that do to their sense of belonging, their mental health?
Yeah, it's a really profound concern, and it's something the sources definitely grapple with. One key insight is that this kind of society would need extraordinary cultural resilience.
Oh, so?
They'd likely need to develop unique social structures, new forms of community bonding to counteract the isolation, maybe specific ceremonies to mark relativistic milestones, moments of synchronization or significant time passage relative to others, cultivating a deep shared understanding of their unique place in time, not just space.
So adapting culturally to their physics.
It would undoubtedly be challenging, but human adaptability is pretty vast when you look at our history.
True. This whole relativity republic idea, it really pushes into some deep philosophical territory, doesn't it? Which the sources don't ignore.
Not at all.
Like, can you actually govern people effectively when their clocks are literally ticking at different speeds? Does that fundamentally alter the social contract?
It has to, doesn't it?
And do these relativistic citizens over generations eventually become something else? Maybe post-human, living completely outside Earth's natural biological and temporal rhythms, almost like a different branch of humanity.
It forces us to really question what identity is. If generations pass outside for every generation inside the ships, do they still belong to Earth or to humanity as we know it in any meaningful way?
What happens when their language, their culture, their art, maybe even their morality just drifts so far apart because of that time difference?
Philosophers like Carlo Rovelli have argued that time isn't this universal, absolute thing ticking away the same for everyone. It's local. It's relational.
Right. Depends on where you are and how you're moving.
The Relativity Republic would be, in a way, living proof of that idea. A moving demonstration that culture, society, it's all relative to, tied to your frame of reference. And yet, there's a paradox there, too. Such a republic might also become this fascinating library of human continuity.
How do you mean?
By moving slower through time relative to the universe outside, they could potentially preserve cultures, ideas, ways of life as they once were, long after they've changed or vanished elsewhere. A kind of nation of memory, but in constant motion.
A nation of memory in motion. I like that. So wrapping this up, what does this all mean for us thinking about it today?
Well, I think
The Relativity Republic, it's clearly more than just, some fun science fiction idea, though it is fun.
it is fun, yeah.
Yeah.
But it's also a really powerful thought experiment, isn't it? A metaphor, maybe, for how human societies might adapt to truly extreme conditions or environments.
And perhaps down the line, maybe even a potential model or at least an inspiration for how humanity might actually organize itself out there among the stars.
Could be.
This deep dive, I feel like it's really shown that as we, aim for the stars, push outwards, we might not just be stretching physical distances. We could be fundamentally reshaping society itself, the very foundations of what it means to be human.
Indeed. And it's truly compelling to think that even time itself could become a kind of territory,
Yeah.
a dimension that can be, claimed, explored, lived within in radically different ways.
Yeah.
So maybe something for you listening to really ponder is how these fundamental scientific principles, things we learn about in physics, might genuinely alter our deepest understandings of being human, of belonging somewhere or somewhen, and of what progress even means. It's a reminder, perhaps, that knowledge is really most valuable when we don't just know it, but we understand it and think about how to apply it. And that critical thinking is just so crucial in a world that's just overflowing with information.